it wasn't so much like I was broke and desperate, broke and I didn't have any money. I mean, I was using a credit card sometimes to pay that monthly lot, but it was just the thing just sitting there, just gnawing at me, and where I have to make a payment every single month, and just capital sitting there. And it's,
Hello, and welcome to this week's episode of the Real Estate Investors Club podcast. I'm here with Paul DeCampo. Paul is a copywriter in the real estate space. I'm going to get him to explain to us exactly what that is in a minute. He's joining us from Idaho, which Paul just explained to me is south of Calgary, for those of you Canadian listeners who are not situating exactly where that is on the map. So welcome to the show, Paul.
glad to be on, Terry. Appreciate it.
So just by way of getting started, can you tell me a little bit about your journey through life that has led you to be sitting here with me today?
Yeah. So at the end of the day, I'm a copywriter today, active professional copywriter. I have my own business where we implement certain copy marketing templates and sequences for investors. But I started off as an investor. I still am an investor, but I started off as an operator, wholesaler, flipper. Back in 2016, 2015, just like everybody, dug into Rich Dad, Poor Dad, no sexy story, but just, read the book and dove into the rabbit hole of biggerpockets.com, of wholesaling. And I started just marketing, mailing a lot. I came from W-2 blue collar world. I didn't know anything about sales, about marketing. I was a welder. I was a crew foreman for a natural gas company at the time. I was living in Southern California at the time. So really competitive, hot market for real estate. And so I had a hard time, like a lot of people, jumping in. I was door knocking foreclosures. I have a story that I tell people who subscribe to my email list about how I got chased down by gangbangers in a bad neighborhood in SoCal because I was door knocking the wrong neighborhood for foreclosures, and so I had a hard time, and it mainly came because I didn't really know what to do as far as following up with sellers. I'm going direct to seller, by the way. This isn't MLS. This isn't making offers on MLS, although I probably should have. I probably should have done a lot more of that, but this is direct to seller marketing and sales. So I remember sitting in my car because I had to get away from the kids to make follow-up calls. I'd be sitting in my car going through my list. I had a CRM at the time, going through my list of who to follow up with. And I'd get to Mrs. Sally, the seller, and I would see it and I would make that call. But I don't know if this is just me, or if this is other people, but every time I make a follow-up call, I feel like it was I really hope that they don't answer. So I was going through that stage. It was just constant fear. I didn't know what to say, or I'd let some justification get in the way. I'd say, you know what, Mrs. Sally, I called her 2 weeks ago. I think I'm just going to push her off for another 2 weeks. So the point of my story is that led me into exploring getting to get better at sales and marketing, because I really sucked at it. So I went into the rabbit hole of marketing and copy from Trevor Mock at Investor Carrot. He's the one that I really attached to and learned a lot of stuff from him. And then that just opened up another rabbit hole of marketing and direct response marketing and copy. And I read every bunch of old school books on the topic. I accidentally became a copywriter for Carrot, for Trevor Mock, investorcarrot.com. And I was writing about a year for them. I was flipping mobile homes at the time as well. So things started to pick up. I was flipping mobile homes onto notes. I was flipping land into notes as well. I was creating a land flipping business. At the same time, I was doing freelance copy. And so around 2019, I had to make a decision. Because I wanted to quit my W-2. So I had to make a decision, either continue doing land flipping and building that business. That's going to take about 3, maybe 4 years to actually have consistency, or just quit now and do freelance copy, because that was tomorrow I'd have the same amount of income coming from my W-2. I chose the latter because it was just a faster route, and I actually enjoyed doing it. I actually enjoyed writing direct response. I write direct mail packages for land developers selling hotel developments in Vegas. I was writing for coaches, writing for print shops, managing their email marketing and things like that. Along the way, I created a service for off-market investors where we create copy-driven drip sequences or follow-up systems for their CRM, where no leads fall through the cracks, because 80% of these seller leads, they're not going to sell today, tomorrow, even next week. They're going to sell 3-6 months, a year from now. So I want to make sure there's a quality way that you follow up with these people.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And so like, let's go there, because I think, if we're trying to create value for our listeners here, like this is something that we can all relate to. No matter what kind of business you're in, if it's you're looking to maintain contact with sellers, if you have some other kind of business and you're capturing all these leads, and like you said, very often the purchasing decision or the selling decision, if you're in a real estate context, is going to be made maybe even months, maybe even a year after they first come into your ecosystem or you first touch base with them. And then how do we turn that into, how do we create a system that none of those things fall through the cracks? So tell me, just from a really high level perspective, like, how does that work? So let's say I'm doing direct mailings. I talk to somebody and then they're not ready to make a decision right away. Then what happens? Like, tell me, just walk me through even what's a CRM, right? Because I think like a lot of our listeners, if they don't own a business, where they've used a CRM, like it's not clear necessarily what's the value of that, and what does it do?
Right. Yeah. So, we've talked a little bit beforehand that you have a lot more Canadian listeners. So, and there's different rules, marketing rules that apply in Canada versus the US. So I'll try to be cognizant of, conscious of that. And so we're going to talk about a 10,000 foot view of it. So it's really just having a process of a way of doing things, rather than being scattered brain about it, rather than allowing feelings to dictate how and when you follow up with somebody. And that was my problem when I started. It was just, I was allowing feelings to drive the follow-up, and it shouldn't be that way. I was allowing people to tell me when to follow up. For example, a seller says, oh, I might sell in 6 months from now. So then you respect that, and then you do that, and you find out that you already sold. So as a marketer, you should be having instead a system that does the marketing for you, rather than a seller telling you how to market. So there's a lot to unfold and unwrap, and what I do. So something that we do in OmniDrip is we deliver email, SMS tasks that have call scripts, and direct mail. And I'm a big believer in direct mail for follow up as well. We're talking about, when I say follow ups, just so everyone's clear, and I'm going to talk about CRMs too. I'm talking about when a lead raises their hand to you, and you've already spoken to them in some form, and they're interested in getting an offer from you. That's what I mean by lead. I'm not talking about prospecting. I'm not talking about cold lead generation. So I know that, in Canada, probably SMS marketing, cold marketing doesn't exist there, and soon to not exist in the US as well. But those are when I say follow up, I'm talking about when they tell you, hey, we're not ready yet, and you haven't given them an offer. You have a sequence there that leverages that event, a drip sequence. And CRMs, there's all kinds of CRMs. Do you use a CRM, Terry?
I do.
Okay, which one do you use?
Well, actually, I'm quite active on LinkedIn. So I use Octopus, which works on LinkedIn.
Okay.
And actually, we have a real estate coaching business, and our decision that we have to make in the next 2 weeks is which CRM we're going to use for our real estate coaching business. So, and
Okay.
I used to also coach martial arts, and in the studio, we had a CRM for our
Which
clients. Yeah.
which martial arts, by the way? I don't know if you can see my black belt on the bottom here, but which martial arts?
You're a black belt. Jiu-jitsu, Brazilian
Oh,
jiu-jitsu.
cool. I am a practitioner of jiu-jitsu. I'm not a black belt, but I'm black belt in Sansu, Kung Fu Sansu. But cool. Don't mean to get this off rails here, but let's.
Yeah, I'm off the rails already. You say the word
All right.
jiu-jitsu, man, I'm already off the rails.
I love it. I absolutely love it. I love jiu-jitsu. So let's talk about CRM. I mean, like, you need something in every business. You need something that is a database. So I've met lots of old school investors that use spreadsheets. That I met maybe two that use pen and paper and a folder system, right? So yeah, that's fine if you can. It doesn't matter what tech you use. It's not the tech that does it for you. It's making sure everything's organized and you're keeping up with it. So you can have the best tech if you're not actually using it. It's worthless.
Did you know the Real Estate Investors Club podcast is starting a mastermind? Imagine having the power and the knowledge that's shared in these podcasts in a group setting. You get to have accountability, build a peer group, and also develop a network that's going to help support your real estate goals. Please check out more information at terrieshower.com and select the Mastermind tab on the drop-down menu on the left.
So CRM is just a database that can do a lot of bells and whistles stuff. Typically, I'm working with wholesalers who are using CRMs that are specific to the real estate world, specific to off-market wholesalers and flippers. So those CRMs, and I've worked in a dozen of them, they all have one purpose, and that is making sure your seller leads are there and that you're doing something with them. So that means, you can talk to sellers within those CRMs. All of them are different. All of them have different bells and whistles, but most of them, 99% of them, they have automation already. So what I mean by automation is, hey, you get a seller, comes in through your direct mail. They're interested. Let's just say, for example, you give them an offer, but they tell you your offer is too low. So the next decision is, what do you do with that lead? Are you going to call it dead? Or are you going to continue following up? In the US, and the mentality of that is you keep following up because they want to sell. You don't know who they're going to sell to, so you might as well keep showing up. And so you can drop them into what's called a drip sequence, which is it's an automation within your CRM that will fire off all sorts of things for you. Most people just stick with SMS. I don't. I stick with SMS. I stick with a Loom video. I'll send a Loom video. I'll send a direct mail piece. And the direct mail piece is not going to say, hey, I'm looking to buy your house. It's going to be in the format of, hey, we've spoken already. I know our offer was too low, but would you reconsider a new offer? Like something in that format, So I am getting them from all angles. So that's an example of what I mean by, like, from CRM to a sequence. That's what a wholesaler would do. I don't know, I don't know how have you seen, have you, with your students, do they operate in a CRM already or not really?
I think not really. I think for us here, wholesaling is not the biggest thing in Canada. Like, not a whole ton of people make that their main gig. I think where this is most applicable is a lot of people will do, like, direct mailings, and then they will get answers from those direct mailings. People will call in, and then that is where I see, because I own a bunch of buildings and I get people's direct mailings, and I see very often where the cracks are in their follow-up, because there's actually only one guy who I spoke to once who has followed up. And, like, I must have gotten, I don't know, 20, 30 pieces of direct mail like that, where, like, sometimes I take the time to call the person back. Sometimes I email them. Sometimes I stalk them, like, on, social media or whatever. And I know that I've had contact with them, but then there's just no follow-up. And then, like, a year later, I'll get another piece of mail from the same person who obviously doesn't know who I am. They're contacting me for a different building because my name's associated with a different address. And, like, there's kind of no, like, very clearly they're not using a CRM, because if they were, they wouldn't just send me the same piece of direct mail again. Like, they would be in some kind of different process. So I think, just to, like, maybe make this super explicit for people who are not familiar with this process, it's like, if you're building a business where you're going to have people who are interested, who are contacting you for a service, or who you have one touch with, the CRM is, like you said, just like a database, a computer, like a piece of tech that allows you to follow up in a structured way. And then we'll even map that process out for you. And, like, in the martial arts context, we have this, great piece of software, which I'm going to not remember. It was like Champion something. I'm not gonna remember exactly what it was, but I was floored by, the software would remember people's birthdays. It would, say, here's your 1 month anniversary of signing up at the studio. Like, let me, it then has a pop-up like call to check on this membership thing. And it's just so powerful because as you're going about your daily business, you're receiving these alerts that are telling you like, okay, follow up in this way with this person. And like sometimes the system will do it, like the system would send an automatic birthday email, but sometimes it will tell you to take an action. And like I remember being a student in a martial arts dojo that used a system like that, and I was like so touched when they remembered my birthday. I was like, this is incredible. And the power of that is that you're really able to sort of like customize and personalize those things so that you don't lose things. So maybe that's was a big blah blah for me, but maybe you want to just like you have something else to say on the mapping that out.
I know. I think that was perfect, actually. And a drip sequence really, or CRM, it's not needed if you're not looking to really scale. If you're doing one deal a month, two deals a month, and you're not looking to expand past that, I get it. A spreadsheet probably works. It's still CRM, meaning it's a lead management. Another name for CRM is lead management software. So it is something you're managing your leads with, right? You're still getting leads, but if you're gonna go anywhere past that, you definitely need the CRM, and the drip sequences are really going to help you scale past that, because you're taking yourself and you're multiplying yourself. So what I mean by that is there's only so many manual tasks you can set for yourself for every lead that comes in. If you're getting let's just say 20 leads a month, new leads a month, and that's a pretty decent volume. I mean, that's an okay volume, but if you're doing that much, you either have to, you're just using manual tasks to follow up with people. You either need to hire other people, or you need to start implementing some sort of automation that starts to multiply yourself. So that you're sending out an automatic email, an automatic text message at the right time. I'm a big believer in the whole marketing concept of the right message to the right person at the right time. And so that's where my sequences come into play. But I have like 20 sequences. We have 20 sequences. Wholesalers love it. They eat it all up because, and not just wholesalers. I mean, the guys that are doing lots of volume, they love that, because as soon as, and this is where the marketing comes into play, and where it should come to play with anybody in this audience is you're either, with these sequences, you're, if you have a lead that comes in and they express to you, selling is delayed, or they're going to keep the property, for instance. Well, you can either continue to manually put in a task to follow up, or you can have a drip sequence that leverages that scenario, like that event. What I mean by that is if I put them in a drip sequence called like they're keeping the property. Now I can use language. I can structure the language, the copy of those messages to fit that. That's a piece of information I already know, like that I can automate, right? I can talk about, I understand that they're keeping it, but if you're looking to sell, here's X, Y, and Z. Here's our benefit. Here's our feature, whatever it is. I'll talk about copy in a bit, but if they haven't booked an appointment, or you haven't given them an offer yet, that's a piece of information I can leverage for automation, right? So they haven't booked an appointment. Okay, my call to action is going to be, hey, try out our offer at least. Hey, come book an appointment with us so we can check out your house and give you an offer, right? Yeah, does that make sense, Terrie? I mean, yeah. I kind of rambled there about sequences, but I want to try to make this as a good perspective for your audience, because I know that they don't operate in that level yet.
Yeah. Well, so I think like this is think of it as like a decision tree within your system, right? Is that like along the journey, you're going to get specific pieces of information about people. And, I think of this as being on the like receiving end of it. Often people contact me for one building and I'm not ready to sell that building. But if they don't ask the question, they're not going to realize that like I own 20 other buildings. And if you don't like put it in a way, is there another property you're willing to consider selling, or can we like have a conversation? I'm like, well, I just added this to my portfolio, I'm not ready to liquidate it yet, but if the person took the time to learn who am I, or maybe touched back in with me in a different way, the conversation would turn into something completely different. And so like in terms of like how you manage those pieces of information that you get, it allows you to touch the right person, like you said, in the right way. So maybe what would help actually me to understand how this works is, how do you know, have this happen? Because so I have a newsletter, I manage it with MailChimp, and like MailChimp has the possibility to create different lists. So you can have like a list of people who are in a sequence for, the podcast, or people who are in a sequence for coaching, or people who are in a sequence for like one specific different thing. So like how do you build that in? Like when you receive that piece of information, like how do you create your different sequences, and how do you segment that? Have you really been listening to the episode, or has your monkey mind been taking you off in one direction or another? Our mental habits can be our biggest assets or our biggest liabilities as we pursue certain goals. For me, the biggest performance gains have always come from training my mind. In my book, Mindful Landlord, I talk about how you can train your mind and how you can apply some of these strategies to your journey in the real estate field. The book is available on Amazon and also on its website, mindfullandlord.com. Now I'll stop evangelizing for the power of mental training and let you get back to the show.
Yeah, well, and for that business model, it'd be different what I do with investors. I segment a lot less. I would segment a lot less for that business model. And I manage email lists of 60,000 plus people. So I'm aware of segmenting, and I can explain to you how we do it. But for investors, we segment actually between only 3 people. I segment landlord, vacant, and owner occupant. And the reason why I do that, and I don't do it very often. I probably do it for I'd say half of my sequences I segment. But the reason why I do it is because I can now leverage from a landlord to a vacant property lead. Those two have very different problems that one and the other doesn't relate to. So I can only send so many messages. And this is where I think right here, what I'm going to talk about is like, will be very important for everyone listening here. And I can now bring up a benefit that that the vacant house lead won't understand. I can talk about how I can buy the house with tenants in the property. For a vacant house lead, I can talk about the problems of how the house is deteriorating. I might not say it that way, but the house is deteriorating. The problem is that they've got a deteriorating house. It's a liability. Kids complain it. Squatters are in that house, and so forth and so forth. Well, I can leverage that, and I can give them the solution for that. Because a cash offer, here's what's important for investors. A cash offer doesn't really mean much. Like, what does that even like? It can mean a whole host of things, right? But we often get ourselves in a trap of assuming that the other person understands what it's going to deliver, what a cash offer does. But cash offer for a motivated seller doesn't mean really much anything. It's what it's going to deliver. And what that means is, when I first started off, I had a really old school investor give me this tip, and I carried this on for years. He told me to sit down and write 100 different ways that I benefit the seller. Because I was struggling with, and he knew what I was thinking, and what I was thinking is subconsciously I didn't believe in the value I bring to a seller. That it's just about the offer, it's just about the price. But really, when it comes to a motivated seller, there's a whole host of things that we bring to the table. That we save them from embarrassment of putting a sign up. We save them from the embarrassment of a bunch of buyers going through the house because they can, it's a mess, it's a hoarder house, whatever it is, and they're embarrassed by it. While a professional investor doesn't care about any of that stuff. They can leave all their stuff behind, right? To think I was a motivated seller at one point in my life, and I once had a mobile home that I purchased, and the market the local market kind of shifted in that park. And I used to do Lonnie deals, which was buy it in the park and you sell it on owner finance, sell it on a note. And so I bought it from the park, and well, I bought it too high and the market kind of shifted and I was stuck with this property for I think it was about a year, and I was still making the lot payments on it because it was in a park. I was making those payments every single month, and I'm like, oh my god! And like, there was a point where it was keeping me up at night. It really was. It wasn't so much like I was broke and desperate, broke, and I have any money. I mean, I was using a credit card sometimes to pay that monthly lot, but it was just the thing just sitting there, just gnawing at me, and where I have to make a payment every single month, and just capital sitting there, and it was literally keeping me up at night. And so I didn't really care what, really what the price came in at. I just wanted off my hands. So I only took a $5,000 loss on that once I finally sold it. So not bad. But what I'm getting at is I understand the feelings that a motivated seller goes through. And it's not just so when we keep repeating the same thing, the same mantra, are you still interested in selling? Are you still interested in the same variation? It just annoys the hell out of people. And instead, we want to bring value by mentioning exactly what we're bringing to the table. Is it, I might send a message that says, hey, Mrs. Sally, I'm just letting you know. I know that you're still waiting on. I know that you believe our offer is too low, but just letting you know that with our offer, you can leave all your unwanted things behind. Right? I bring in an actual feature and benefit to the table. Like, this is what we do. I might bring in also proof and social proof and credibility as well. That's important to bring into our marketing messages. Meaning, like when it comes to sellers, especially motivated sellers, they're skeptical, and so they may be talking to other wholesalers, other flippers, other investors. So if I send a message that directs them towards a review, say, hey, Mrs. Sally, hey, make sure whoever you use, make sure that using somebody who's credible and has an online presence. Here's what other sellers say about us. That's a real message, by the way, that like a variation of it. But the principles is there, directing them towards my online assets for that proof and credibility. So anyway, that's just kind of my understanding. That's my philosophy. That's what I've experienced over the years and what I built into our system. So.
We're kind of like getting towards the end of the time for the interview. I wanted to just ask you, in terms of, it sounds like you really did a lot of educating yourself as far as marketing goes and copywriting and stuff like that. You threw out a couple names before. Are there some resources that our listeners could check out if they want to understand a little bit more, like how to wrap their heads around this process? A book, something that you recommend?
Yeah. There's a lot of books out there, but I don't know if they would be relevant to. So, I mean, they can go to my website. Or, I mean, that's the first. I mean, it sounds like I'm shamelessly pitching it, but I think that would be the first step if you want to understand what exactly I'm talking about here, because I do have my own automation. If you go to REI OmniDrip and you find a sign up link, you don't have to book a call. At the bottom of the page, there's a sign up link to get samples and demo. You'll get put into an automation that actually talks about a lot of this stuff. But if you wanted to learn about copy, and a lot of investors don't want to learn about copy. So, but if you happen to want to learn about copy, I would say check out Gary Halbert. He's long gone, but he's a legendary copywriter. Yeah, I mean, that's probably the two resources I would recommend if somebody wants to learn about copy. For marketing, I would say, and I'm looking at my bookshelf to see what that would be relevant to this audience. You know what? Spin selling is a really good. This is for sales, because sales and marketing goes hand in hand. Spin selling, I think, is a really excellent book on the sales process. Because I struggle with sales, and I had to learn that whole thing, the whole process of it and everything. And that book there, Spin Selling, I thought was a really good breakdown of what you're actually it's contrary to Zig Ziglar and all the great, and I love those guys, but it's contrary to that typical salesman look that you have that shows up in a Ferrari, slick suit, hair back, big old smile. It's more of a question-based selling process. So.
Mhm, mhm. Yeah, and I think, you're putting a finger on something there that a lot of people struggle with because, like, real estate, whatever door you're getting into it through, be it you just, became a real estate broker, you just got your license, if you're trying to start out as an investor, you're trying to raise capital for stuff. Like, when people go into business, it's a business. When people go into business, they struggle with the sales aspect because we all have had those, like, annoying, pushy used car salesmen, vacuum cleaner salesmen, things. And people who have not chosen to make a life in sales very often struggle with that because they're like, I feel like I have to bother people. I feel like I have to sell myself. And anything that can kind of, turn that on its head and get people to think about it in a different way, I think is super constructive. So we're going to drop those links in the show notes. I haven't read those two books, so or checked out those two resources. So I know I'm going to check that out. And yeah, anything else that I missed? You want to add something else?
I was gonna say, if anybody struggles with that notion of yeah, I think that's really a subconscious obstacle people face is getting over that hump of having to make a call, make a sale, not seem pushy and all that. There's a usually books I can relate better when I'm like I just got done reading it or I'm reading it now. I'm reading currently, which I thought I'd never like, but Kevin Hart's biography called You Can't Make This Up. Can't Make This Stuff Up. It's actually an excellent book on the hustle phase of an entrepreneur and what it actually takes. The amount of things all the little hustle he had to do in the beginning as a comedian, going beyond what people typically do. So I think a lot of people underestimate what it actually takes, and so they and I could relate because when I started, I was the same way. It was like, okay, well, I'll send 1,000 mailers this month, and I should see some traction. No, right? I'll go door knock 10 doors this month. I'll go make 50 cold calls, and I'll make the decision whether or not to continue. It's like, no, it's like it takes an incredible amount of effort to get to a point. I know that's not to discourage anybody. That well, maybe it does discourage some people, um, but it is to just speak the truth of it. And it's going to put you in a much better place if you understand, hey, if you put yourself in a goal, like I got to make 1,000, I'm going to make 1,000 cold calls, just, I don't think you can cold call in Canada. I'm not too sure, but, that's for example, I'm making 1,000 cold calls and I'll make a decision. I remember meeting a guy that owns the biggest franchise in my local area, biggest franchise of this fast food called Wilder Grill. It's pretty popular in SoCal, and he was struggling. He told me the story about his struggling was taking him a year or two, and he wasn't making any money. Was broke, was poor. He was trying to run this franchise. He's a first time franchise owner, and his grandpa or his uncle gave him. He said, "Give it yourself 1,000 days, and then make a decision to quit." And I don't think people give themselves that enough effort. That enough timeline, I should say, or that enough tasks or actions. So anyway, that's my last thing to say
Mhm,
about
mhm. No, I think you're 100% right, and, we went off the usual script that I take my interviewees through, because you have a specific business model, but, like, that's always my last question when I have people on the show is, what lifestyle hits did you take or what sacrifices did you make? And, you know, is it the social media, ecosystem that we live in that is all about private jets and people's happy moments, and it's not about all the time spent, like, metaphorically running on the road, putting in those hours and all the difficult things. You mentioned sleepless nights over your trailer park situation. Like, anybody who's been in the investment game for a while has had sleepless nights over countless things, but people, they don't, that's not what they project out in public space, and it's also not what I think they bear witness to when they have space on stage or space, on podcasts or in public to talk about stuff, because it's not projecting that seamless image of success. And I think, us as people who have some airtime, like, to be vulnerable and to say, like, no, it is actually really hard, and here's how I stumbled, here's how everybody who made it in a certain space, like, we all struggle to get there, and the 10,000 hours or the 1,000 days or whatever the metric is of effort that you put into something, like, I think pulling back the curtain on that is just super important. um
Yeah.
so, Paul, we've gone a little bit over time. I want to really thank you for the time that you spent with me today, for the value that you shared with our audience. I feel like I have some homework to do after the show. That's the way I like to leave my podcasts, to feel like I got some stuff that I need to follow up on. And audience, if you found anything here constructive, you found it useful, you think a friend could profit from it, go ahead, share it with one person. Paul, thank you for being on the show with me.
I appreciate being on. Thanks.
Bye-bye.